Hey everyone, today we're going to look at the top 10 most common decks that you will see at V-Premium BRO this weekend. Now you might be saying, hey Kai, what is the point? It is just all going to be Gurguit. And I will say, yes, you are not wrong. It will most likely be a lot of Gurguit. But as you might not know, or you might know if you've been playing this game for a while, not everyone plays the best deck in the format. Because some people just like to play other decks. Some people don't like Gold Paladin. Some people can't afford Gold Paladin. And some people just don't care. Right? That is it. But like let's be real here, right? Although Gerget is the best deck, it's like tier 1 by itself at the moment. There are still a lot of tier 2 decks that people will definitely bring. Just because they don't want to play the Gerget mirror. Right? It is a very, how do I say it, sad matchup that I'm sure a lot of people are already tired of playing during testing. So let's kind of look at what people will bring and how good they are, right? Have a little chat on what they do. So first up we have is Gerget, right? You probably know this is like the most standard build of Gerget you'll probably ever find. All of these lists are pretty much taken from previous season, like Springfest and things like that. So they are historical lists. I didn't make these ones up by myself, okay? Because you guys might say, Kai, you're a terrible deck builder. Well, this ain't me. This is someone else. But I think there are some. Well, I'll talk about it later. But yeah, this is. I think this was like a London deck. The winning team of London played this deck, and this is just a very standard deck, right? You have your core, right, which is basically 4 Gurgits, 1 Percival, right, and then you got your Sagamores, your Max Slash, very cool. Then the rest of the deck is just like you're usually running 8 fronts because fronts are good. You go very wide, and that's how you really pop off. And then you got some of your other cards like your Jeffries and your like your Graith Researcher, all that, just trying to make the deck more consistent. The deck is very strong when it pops off. When you get 3 excels, you basically just go Gurgit, right? You just Gurg up and win. And it's very hard to stop. And then they think that you're done with all your attacks, but then suddenly a bunch more attacks come out. It's just really silly. So that's why it's the strongest deck in the format. Not much else to say, right? So basically this is the deck to beat. And it's really up to you to know how to play the mirror / how to like combat this deck, right? But moving on to like a non-Gurgit deck. The next deck we have is Shahrot. This was the Australian Springfest winner list for V as well. This is actually not the most standard deck I think a lot of people are playing. They're usually at least running some Amons as an alternate ride. This one is just running drag form, variance drag form, just to be able to access more cards. So usually instead of like the Werewolf Quetzal, they run some yellow bolts as well. But otherwise, the rest of the deck is just pretty much standard. They run a lot of crits. They usually only run 2 draws. Sometimes they even go max crits, right? Just 12 crits instead of just running the draw, which you might just see because people might just want to win quicker. But otherwise, the core of the deck still revolves around, you know, restanding your number of terrors, drawing a billion cards so you can kind of live against other decks, and then kind of dumping on your opponent, and then they can't guard. So that's basically the deck's very linear game plan, but it's also very effective when it goes off. And the only time when it kind of doesn't go off is just when it just kind of bricks and doesn't get any soul, right? So that is sad times. But otherwise, yeah, another strong deck. It was actually kind of hard finding this list in all the Springfest because I think most of them just came in top 8 and died instead of top 4. So yeah. Otherwise, yeah, it's still definitely a potent deck. And now, especially when Prism's gone, another deck that draws a bunch of cards that can usually survive against this. Against like Gurguit, for example, you draw a lot to survive them, but then you kind of beat big times with your opponent, which they might not be able to deal with, which is pretty cool, right? Then the next deck we have is Granblue. This list was actually my list, which came second at Springfest. And I mean, look, I think this deck is actually pretty good as long as you don't G-assist 5 times. If you do, then I hope you signed up for the next region for BRO because you're going to be going there very quickly, right? But otherwise, this deck basically just tries to get like multiple Skull Dragon attacks, and usually many decks just can't deal with Skull Dragon when it's bashing you in the face and you're at like 4 or 5 damage. That's the strength of the deck. The other strength of this deck is that it's relatively consistent, right? You can usually get the pieces that you want. The game plan, again, is very simple. And, you know, it does have an okay amount of hand, right? Because you can spam your kind of ghost ship as well just to get the draws and kind of get that sustain going. It's kind of hard to damage deny as well, because you have Jesse the Ghosty that can, once it's in the bin, you can always kind of get one CB off, and then you can basically do your entire turn. And then in terms of like guards, they might run some different kind of triggers. I mean, in terms of triggers, they might run some different kind of triggers. Some might just run one PG here, just because you can kind of salvage it if you're in a matchup that you need to do that with. But otherwise, they do run a heavy amount of crits as well. So if you randomly no-guard the Vanguard, you might be just taking a bunch of damage. And that could just be GG, because they just Skull Dragon you and you're dead. Right. Moving on, we have this other deck as well that is also very popular during Springfest. This is Mo's deck. So you can see this is super bling bling. He went like infinite 0, right? Like X to infinity. Something like that, right? Wins in Europe. For Springfest, he basically they won so much. They won so much. It's insane. But this is like a very, very popular Astral Poets list. You can see this list basically runs very little 1s and 2s, because usually your 1 can get your 2, and then you can just pop off there. You get those Astral Planes going, and you just destroy your opponent before they can do anything. You trigger all your crits, get billions of drive checks on your Valkyrian, and you basically win, right? The one weakness to this deck that you can say is like you can try and rush them down, because normally they won't really have much defensives in their hands early game. But if you can't and they just get their game plan going, you're going to be in a world of hurt, just because you're going to have to guard like a 70k twice. And then their Vanguard is also fat, and they're going to be triggering a bunch of crits, etc, etc. That's very, very scary. That's very scary. But otherwise very effective. But I don't know. Like, when we go into a tournament where it's like 8/9 rounds, because that's where the BRO numbers are heading towards, I don't know how well this will be, right? You want to go at like X1 at least. If you go X2, you're praying. And I mean, I guess this is like kind of like a, you know, Genesis, lots of gods, cool deck to pray with, right? But hey, if you go well, you'll go well. If you don't, that's just how it is, right? That's just how it is. But otherwise, it's still a very solid game plan. I'll expect a lot of people taking this. The next deck we have is Gerget, right? You might be saying, wow, Kai, you've already shown a Gerget. But that's the thing. There's going to be so many Gurgits that you're going to see different variations of Gurgits. And you're going to look at this deck and go, this is pretty much the same list you showed like 4 decks ago. And that is right. That is right. But if you look carefully, I've added 2 criticals to this list. Because remember, in BRO, you're playing an open deck format. So your opponent will be like, what deck are you playing? Oh, it's Gerget. I'm going to take a quick look at it. They see you run 8 fronts. They'll be like, oh, that means I can no guard on 4, right? So they will no guard you on 4. But if you're running crits, and this is where like the meta play, your brain is like expanding, right? You'll be like, oh, if I run crits, then they'll have to guard on 4. And your work is done, right? Your work is done. So this is like the next level of Gurgiting that Gerget players will like maybe take, where they just run some crits. They might even run like even more crits. They might run like super rainbow just because your opponent can see your deck list, while at a real tournament they can't, right? So Gerget, right? Very, very, how do you say it? Golden? I don't know how to end this. Next deck. We have Narakami. So this one was the deck that smashed me at Springfest. This is the first place deck from Australia as well. This is just Narakami, Vanquisher. It's just been really good for a long time. And then every deck that gets banned, this deck gets better because it doesn't get banned, right? It can just pop off very, very quickly, no matter, it doesn't really require counterblast, which is quite scary. And then when it gets counterblast, it draws 3 and then gives a bunch of stuff power and then still smacks you. It can easily just do a bunch of damage to you as well if you don't get any damage triggers. So it's very, very scary. Normally, people do run crits though over fronts, but you know, this player Camelo does run I think he might have experimented with 8 fronts, and that's how it went. He also runs some birds. I've seen the Phoenix build like a few times. Not a super fan of it, but I do know people do run that as well. So you might see some Phoenixes, you might not. But overall, the core of the game plan is still the same. Do a lot of attacks, big excel lines, big power to get over your triggers. Basically, it's undeniable, right? Some decks are deniable. This one, undeniable. Doesn't require your opponents to be on grade 3, things like that. The only bad part about this deck is that the numbers, the ratios aren't great. If it doesn't get like the pieces to kind of bind, then then you have like a dead hand, but hey, you know, dead hands happen for everyone, right? The next deck we have is definitely, I don't know why this is here. Neonectars will definitely not be shown. The next deck we have is Chaos Messiah, right? Why is Chaos Messiah here? This is actually, this was the, I think this was like 3rd place in Japan Daivangasai. Why is Chaos Messiah relevant? Because Gurguit is relevant. That is pretty much it. You just run the Chaos engine to basically say no to Gurguit. Hard counter, like basically all the Excel decks, right? They get Excel, then they don't get Excel. That's pretty much it. Then you like go into like Messiah for either your bad matchups or your like finisher, because you just have that part as well. You know, you can high roll still with like the Volcos and like, yeah, basically you're just combining 2 parts, right? You have the high roll part, and then you have the normal chaos, very annoying, getting rid of all your Excel circles kind of part. Of course, it does get rid of like protects and like force markers, but the key thing is just killing Gurgits, right? And reason that is basically why some people will bring this. There will be variants of this, of course. I know like Malaysia was won by like a Chaos Messiah as well for their VMC. But yeah, I think this will kind of rise up in popularity. There will definitely be some people bringing something like this. Yeah. The next we have this deck. I actually think Raging Form is not as good as basically every other deck shown, including like Chaos Messiah. But I know people will bring Raging Form because they have to. Well, not they have to, they want to, right? It's a Shadow Paladin deck. It's either this or Luard, and I think Raging is like way more popular than Luard at the moment. I kind of rate both, right? I like Luard. I'm a Luard guy myself, but Raging, you'll see people bring it. It's a very, very aggressive game plan. They can just go immediately, which is very, very nice when you're against some decks like Gurguit, where you just want to push them out of the game as quick as possible, or like Genesis. So this will be a deck, right? This will be a deck. Variants of this deck do exist. A lot of people run just like 49 Revenges and then like the one-off Brandwin or like the one-off Danger Lunge. This one ran slightly different. They ran like 2 Brandwins and then a Leofowl to kind of get more stuff, which is like, okay. But I guess like the small number difference really doesn't matter. It just comes down to how high can you like high roll if you're like Raging Forms in the early game. All right. Then the second last deck we're going to see here is this Aqua Force deck. The reason why I'm using this Japanese Aqua Force deck log, right, is because this is the English deck log has a problem with Pursuit Assault where it's showing the wrong card. So this is like a winning Japanese list as well. And this is just pretty much Thavas, but the big difference now compared to before is in English, we got Adelaide's, right? So this lady here, this is now out in English. It was out like for like, I think a month already, and people will probably be able to get it, and that's why this deck has gotten to like the next power level. Before you didn't have Adelaide's, so you were slightly less powerful, but you were still a good deck. But now that you have the Adelaide's, you have the Pursuit Assaults, you're good to go. They're very, very scary deck. Basically, by their second Turner grade 3, they can just pop a lot of pressure. They also draw a lot too, so their hand will be decently big. It'll be very hard to break, and then they'll just destroy in that one turn, and then it's very, very hard. So kind of cool. Bit expensive though if you don't own the Pursuit Assaults. And then last deck that we're going to see is the Gerget deck as well. So you're going to be going, wow, Kai, what is the difference between this Gerget deck? And then you're going to look at it carefully and go, I see the difference. They're running the Ezel engine just to get that edge over their opponent, isn't it? And I would say you're half right, because then I'd say, you know how like in Vanguard you have the meta dogs, the meta chasers, the people who play the best deck. I like playing the best deck. I would admit that I'm a meta dog. There's nothing wrong being a meta dog, right? But then you have the originalists, right? The people who played their clan or played the deck forever, even when it was bad, right? And these are basically what they need to make themselves different from all the meta dogs. So they fully high rarity the deck. Look at this, right? Everything is high rarity. They're dedicated. This is the dedication. If these fronts could be foil, they would be foil, right? But unfortunately, they're not. If this Max Slash was foil, they would make it foil, but they can't. So they're only running 2 copies of this. But they can replace at least one of those copies with this max rarity Ezel. So you're gonna see a lot of original Gerget plays. They've been dedicated to Gerget for a very, very long time, and yeah. That's the main difference of this deck, but it's also because they run the Ezel engine just to try to get an edge. So you're right too. You're right, true. But those are basically the decks that you're going to see this weekend. You're probably going to see a few more, right? They probably won't be as popular, but they'll be definitely more popular than Neo Nectar. So that's a plus. Anyway, let me know what you guys think. Do you think there will be other decks? Do you rate decks? How many Gerget decks should I put in this video? Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you guys at BRO this weekend. Be sure to check it out. It will be another fun weekend of no overtriggers, right? Bye!